So, here's the truth. Every single Labour government since 1945 has ended the same way. Broke Britain, destroyed the pound, mountains of debt and a smug handover to the Tories with the bill. Attlee, 1951, bankrupt. Callaghan, 1979, IMF begging bowl. Gordon Brown, 2010, the no money left saga. Starmer, 2025, already the biggest tax rate in 70 years, and the growth is in the toilet. 4 times, 0 exceptions. Same socialist playbook, same catastrophic result. This isn't just bad luck, it's literally just Labour. So anyway, let's have a look at the shenanigans that constantly goes on whenever a Labour government is in charge, and why they always seem to destroy public opinion and throw our country to the wolves. But if you enjoy watching these videos, then please smash like, comment and subscribe. And if you're feeling extra saucy, give me a follow on Patreon, where you can get involved in the creation process in a lot of different ways and have your name in every video going forward. Cheers! So from the moment Clement Attlee's government seized power in 1945, a devastating economic pattern has repeated itself with almost mechanical precision every single time the party has held office for more than a handful of years. They inherit a country that is either stable or recovering. They immediately embark on an orgy of nationalisation, welfare expansion and public spending. They promise a fairer society funded by the rich and big business. Taxes are hiked, the state balloons, productivity collapses, capital flees, the currency weakens, and within a decade or less, Britain is plunged into crisis, left with mountains of debt, a broken economy, and the humiliating task of begging international institutions to rescue the nation. Attlee left Churchill a bankrupt exchequer and a devalued pound in 1951. On to Wilson and Callaghan, they crawled to the IMF in 1976. Blair and Brown handed the keys to David Cameron with a smirking note admitting there was no money left in 2010, and now, just 16 months into Keir Starmer's administration, Rachel Reeves has delivered the biggest tax raid since Attlee himself, while growth flatlines and business confidence evaporates. Right-wing critics do not regard this as a coincidence or the fault of global events. They see it as the inevitable consequence of Labour's core ideology, a religious belief that the state can and should solve every problem by spending money it does not have, taxing wealth creators until they leave, and regulating enterprise until it suffocates. The left always cries Tory austerity caused this when the bills finally come due. This video is the full unapologetic case that Labour does not merely mismanage the economy, it systematically bankrupts Britain because socialism and solvency are fundamentally incompatible. We will examine the 4 great Labour eras of destruction: Attlee 1945 to 51, Wilson Callaghan 1964 to 1979, Blair Brown 1997 to 2010, and the Starmer Reeves 2024 to present, and demonstrate that the same poisonous recipe is being cooked again right now, only this time with net zero dogma and identity politics sprinkled on top for of extra cost, not to mention the copy paste reform policies that they're trying to bring in now to kind of hold the populist vote. So here we go. Clement Attlee came to power in 1945, promising a new Jerusalem bill on nationalisation, cradle-to-grave welfare and the NHS, and he delivered it by mortgaging Britain's future while the country was still on its knees from 6 years of total war. Coal, steel, railways, road haulage, airlines, gas, electricity and even the Bank of England were seized by the state in a frenzy of ideological confiscation that destroyed shareholder value. By 1947, Britain was so broke that bread and potatoes were rationed worse than during the war itself, and in 1949, 5 years after the war ended, Attlee devalued the pound by 30% overnight, wiping out savings and signalling to the world that the British socialism was already bankrupt. When Labour were thrown out of government in 1950, they left Churchill, yes that Churchill, with dollar reserves at rock bottom, a balance of payments crisis and a welfare state that had been built on borrowed American money and promises that could never be kept. Right-wing historians argue that Attlee did not merely create the British modern state, he saddled it with structural spending commitments that no subsequent government has ever been able to afford without periodic crises. The NHS and welfare state were morally admirable in intent, but they were launched at a time the country could not afford them, and the bill has been paid by every generation since in higher taxes, slower growth and recurring stellar crises. Attlee's government set the template that every later Labour administration has followed, promised paradise, nationalise, regulate everything, tax the successful into oblivion, then run away when the money runs out and leave the Conservatives or right-wing state, you never know what's around the corner, to clean up the mess. Harold Wilson's 1964 victory was meant to bring the white heat of technology. Instead, it delivered 15 years of stop-go economics, soaring inflation, and the final humiliation of the 1976 IMF bailout under James Callaghan. Taxes on income hit 83% and 98% of investment income. The unions were handed veto power over economic policy, and successive sterling crises forced devaluation in 1967, followed by the ultimate disgrace 9 years later. By 1976, inflation peaked at 27%. The 3-day week had become a reality. Rubbish piled up in the streets during the winter of discontent, and Dennis Healey was forced to turn his plane around at Heathrow to beg the IMF for $2.3 billion, while foreign officials dictated British spending cuts. Again, critics point out that the 1973 oil shock hit every industrial nation, yet only Britain required an international rescue package because Labour had spent the preceding decade expanding the state, subsidising failing industries and printing money to buy off militant unions. The IMF conditions, savage public spending cuts that Labour had refused to impose themselves, were the final proof that socialism could not survive contact with economic reality. When Margaret Thatcher took power in 1979, she inherited corpse cold growth, a broken currency, and a country that had become the sick man of Europe. Sound familiar? Yet within a decade of her supply side revolution, Britain had restored competitiveness while proving that Labour's big state model was not merely inefficient but actively destructive. The 1970s remain the ultimate right-wing cautionary tale. Give Labour long enough in power and they will always take the country to its knees. Tony Blair swept into power in 1997, inheriting the strongest public finances in a generation, low debt, falling unemployment, controlled inflation, and within 13 years Gordon Brown had turned surplus into the largest peacetime structural deficit in British history. Public spending surged from 39% to 48% of GDP, even before the financial crisis of 2008. The Treasury became addicted to city tax revenues, while Brown gutted financial regulation, tax credits and welfare entitlements exploded, and the country was left catastrophically exposed when the 2008 crash arrived. Britain ran a bigger budget deficit than almost any developed nation, required hundreds of billions in bank bailouts, and saw debt double in a handful of years. The infamous Liam Byrne note, "Dear Chief Secretary, I'm afraid there is no money left," was no joke. It was Labour's confession that they had spent every penny of the boom and borrowed billions besides more. Critics always savage Brown's claims to have abolished boom and bust as the height of hubris, arguing that New Labour simply repeated the ancient pattern: expand the state massively during the good times, assume growth will never end, then leave the Conservatives to impose the austerity that a Labour government always seems to create. The result was a lost decade of growth, higher taxes for everyone, and a national debt burden that still hangs around Britain's neck 15 years later. So less than a year and a half in Keir Starmer's government, and the Attlee, Wilson, Blair, Brown pattern is repeating chillingly accurately. A £40 billion tax raid in the first budget, employer national insurance hiked, capital taxes tightened, inheritance tax extended to farms, and growth forecasts slashed to the lowest in the G7, while debt races towards 100% of GDP, and borrowing is already 20% higher than last year. Businesses are issuing profit warnings, investment plans are being shelved, and confidence indicators are essentially collapsed. Reeves always blames her apparent £22 billion black hole that they inherited from the Conservatives, when in reality she inherited falling inflation, record employment, and a growing economy. Her response has been to punish wealth creation in order to fund unreformed public services, net zero subsidies, and public sector pay awards. The same old Labour instincts are on full display. Borrow for overconsumption, and prey growth appears out of nowhere. A lot of commentators warn that Britain is watching 1945, 1976 and 2008 on fast forward, only this time with the added insanity of decarbonisation costs estimated at hundreds of billions, and everyone's favourite topic, immigration policy. That also just adds further pressure to housing and welfare. The verdict is already clear. Unless Starmer and Reeves radically change course, and every historical president says that they will not, this Labour government will follow its predecessors into the familiar cycle of higher taxes, lower growth, capital flight and eventual crisis. Britain has been here before 4 times since the war, and we on the right, our warning could not be louder. Give Labour power and time and they will bankrupt the country again. But anyway, if you did like this video, please smash like, comment and subscribe, and if you really like it, then please check out my Patreon, where you'll be getting directly involved in the creation process and see your name in every video going forward. Thank you very much for watching, and bye bye.